Welcome to the Joyful Movement Podcast, where we redefine exercise as an act of self care and move for our mental health. Here, we break free from diet culture and the obsession with skinniness, shifting the focus to longevity, vitality, and feeling amazing in our body. Movement should be joyful, accessible, and empowering for everyone, no matter your size, shape, age, or fitness level. So let's make exercise something you want to do for your sanity and not your vanity. Ready to move with joy? Let's dive in. And now, here's your host, Snigdha.
Hi, everyone. On today's episode, I have a very special guest. Melanie is a manual osteopath based in Calgary, Alberta. But that's not only it. With 500 hours of yoga teacher training under her belt, she is a yoga teacher and she's also a certified nutritional practitioner and a Reiki master. She uses all of these modalities to educate her clients and students. Mel's journey into the world of health and wellness began during her athletic upbringing. Her deep-seated passion for well-being led her to become a certified nutritional practitioner in 2013. And during this time, she realized the connection between nourishing the body with the right foods and nourishing the emotional, spiritual, and energetic aspects as well. She initially got into yoga for injury prevention and was surprised to discover the positive transformations within her emotional and spiritual self. Yoga became the key to achieving whole body balance, and her journey into becoming a manual osteopath began when she consistently needed treatments due to her own history of injuries from sports, car accidents, and scoliosis. I've personally attended Mel's yoga classes, and she definitely does an excellent job of creating a safe and open-hearted space with guidance and connection. So today we are talking about the evolution of movement as a high-level athlete in her youth to what movement looked like into adulthood and now someone experiencing perimenopause. So let's welcome Mel on the show. Mel, can you take us back to your days as a high-level athlete? What was the experience like for you, and what did movement look like for you back then?
Movement growing up was every day, all the time. I did every sport, gymnastics, swimming, baseball. I was in pretty high level competitive sports. So a lot of it was just kind of about being the best. I was definitely a high energy kid, so I think it was a solution for my parents to put me into something that'll keep me busy and kind of burn out some of that energy. But it was group fitness mainly, team competition, and all about being the best. That's it. How do we become number one?
How do we win the tournament or the competition?
Yeah.
Or right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what were your other motivations for training as a young athlete? Was it just about the performance, the competition, or for you as you were growing up, was it something more?
I definitely feel like the competition was a big part of it, especially in being in like teams that were quite successful. With like a lot of high level athletes, you sort of strive to be just as good as everybody else. There was also, though, like my parents grew up as athletes. And so for them, sports was just a constant, and they really encouraged me to be playing sports. And I think it's what I was really good at, like naturally good at. And so achievement was big. I got a lot of like accolades and celebration. And there was like kind of a lot of love, if we want to just simplify it into that, is that I got a lot of like love and celebration from my parents for being really good at sports. So that was a big motivational factor.
Mm-hmm. So now, how did being an athlete shape your relationship with movement and your body?
Hmm. Well, I think when I was younger, it was just part of everyday life. Like even in high school, I had 3 gym blocks. It's kind of
Oh,
unheard
wow.
of. I did strength, like you learned about strength training.
Wow.
I did a gym and then I did an advanced gym. So it was just it was kind of like, again, part of my identity. It was like what I was seen as being really good at,
Mm-hmm.
and what I achieved and was successful at. And then that sort of adopted into more of that like competitive. I really wanted to play for Canada for rugby. That was like
Oh,
my
wow.
main sport sort of leaving high school. I still continued to sort of dabble um, in lots of different like fun co-ed sports, but rugby was like my main thing. And so that was definitely just about how do I become the best?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. When you were younger, as a young athlete, were there any misconceptions you had about fitness or strength back then that have since changed,
I
other
think
than
when you're,
like you have to be the best?
yeah, I think when you're young, you're pretty like, naive to the fact that this body just does what you want when
Hmm.
you want it to. There's no recovery time. I
Hmm.
remember being like a little bit sore, of course, after like a rugby game when you get demolished, you can feel
Hmm.
that. But other than that, even when I did synchronized swimming like 6 days a week, you're never really tired. You're never sore. It's just exactly part of your schedule, and that's what you do, and you don't really question it. And I think when you get older, you have to start to understand and like relearn what your body needs and how to support it, and how movement can be supportive but it can still be detrimental,
Hmm.
and constantly like reestablishing that relationship. So I feel when you're younger, you don't really necessarily think about it, but when you're
Right.
older, you have to think about it. You really do.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you just don't do it because you maybe don't do
Hmm.
it right, or you do it in a way that's like harmful.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, or you're adding too much pressure into
Yeah.
your day, or you have this like arbitrary system that doesn't even make any sense. Like I know for me when I go to like those intense classes or even a spin class and I'm looking at my watch thinking, "Oh my gosh, I didn't burn X number of calories. This was a terrible workout." Even though the music was awesome, the vibe was awesome, the teacher was awesome, like everything was great about it, but that one number. So I feel like there's this like pressure. Um okay. So transitioning into adulthood with your like tell me about how movement looked for you after your competitive athlete days were over, especially now that you don't have that group atmosphere. Now you're by
Mm-hmm.
yourself, you're working out by yourself, you're moving your body by yourself. What did that look like?
Well, I was sort of forced out of the
Mm,
competitive world. In 2007, I was playing high level rugby. I was also teaching and training and coaching for rugby. It was like my entire life. And I was in 3 car accidents. And then that same year, I also had quite a few injuries. So dislocated a knee and broke my wrist. And
oh
so I
wow.
really started to have to shift out of the mindset of like, okay, if I'm not going to be an athlete, what the heck am I going to do? And I was very lucky that I had an athletic therapist at the time who was becoming an osteopath, which is what kind of inspired me to become an osteopath. She was like, you need to shift. You need to start looking at different forms of movement, and she was actually the one who really sort of encouraged me to explore things like Pilates and yoga, which I had sort of been introduced to yoga a little bit in the synchronized swimming world, because my coach was really into it. But again, I didn't really stick. And
Hmm.
that's when I started being like, okay, well, if I can't move my body because I'm in so much pain and I have all these injuries and issues, and this person's telling me that this is safe, I can start to do this to replace that
Right.
team and group atmosphere. And
Right.
there is something definitely unique about playing in a sport and being bloody on the field and like, being trampled and feeling like you're going to battle with these humans, and it creates really beautiful connection. And I think leaving the world of competitive, that was the hardest part for me, was losing that team atmosphere, losing that community. And then I strive to try to figure out how do I replace that, and that showed up in studios. That was like what I started to develop and see out of going to yoga classes, going to like Pilates, going to bar, was finding that connection piece and that community. And then the workout was just kind of a bonus. So it definitely changed a lot.
Hmm. Was there a period as you were transitioning out of your competitive athletic days and recovering from those car accidents? Were there periods where you struggled with consistency and motivation?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I actually hired my first nutrition coach when I was 19 because I hadn't played sports in, 3, 4 months. I was recovering from my first car accident and I gained all of this weight. And I think I'd had it before, but I was like, yeah, this is good for rugby. However, I was eating like McDonald's and Subway every day. And that was sort of this like opening into, okay, wellness needs to be more than just movement. And, what this is going to look like is me utilizing any tool that I have, but keeping it top of mind. This had to be like a constant goal. It became a value of mine. And definitely anytime we're stressed or we have big change in our life, the first things to go are nutrition and physical exercise.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right, we create space for something and they're
Hmm.
just the easy things that we can sweep out. But
Yeah.
for me, having like gained a lot of weight from not doing it was definitely a motivational factor, especially when I was like in my early 20s. But then also recognizing that like need for community is something that
Hmm.
brings me back every single time I fall off.
Hmm.
Every single
Hmm.
time I'm set back with an injury, we move, I change careers, we buy a house. Like there's always some kind of change we're going through. It's the
Yeah.
constant. Exercise is the first thing, and nutrition are the first things to come back because I just feel so terrible without it, to be honest.
Right. Right. Yeah. Kind of um, going along with that, how did movement evolve as life priorities changed? So what I mean by this is, um, did you get a new mindset when it came to like changing your career maybe or growing in your career or um, you know, uh, fixing your house or did you see those mindset shifts overlap into other areas of your life?
Mm. I think what I recognized was that movement was a form of medicine
Mm.
in so many ways, right? Physically, mentally, energetically. And I think that's been like a constant reminder when life changes and when shit hits the fan, for lack of
Mm-hmm.
a better word,
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
that is like a way that I can restore myself or become grounded again or, feel like in control in a world that is sort of chaotic. Does that sort of answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
for sure. I think more people need to look at movement as medicine because yeah, you mentioned before that, things are going to happen. Um, and sometimes I think a lot of people talk about, things are going to happen as if it's bad things that are going to happen. But sometimes even when good things happen, we don't have to all go for beers. We can go for a spin class and celebrate. We can go for a walk and
Yeah.
celebrate. We don't have to necessarily you know, go out and party and drink a lot of booze or something like that to celebrate. We can still move because I think children, when they say, "Oh, I won an award at school," or "I did this thing," and they're celebrating, they're running around, jumping around, and I think adults don't do that anymore, or we need to try and get back into that, and
Yeah.
um, yeah, absolutely.
Well, and that's that community piece too, I feel, when you recognize that can get community and how that feeds us. We're all
Mm,
inherently in need of connection. That is drilled into us for survival when we're babies, to make that connection with our parents, and that doesn't stop. And so if you start being tied into a fitness community as your point of
mhm,
connection, you're going to make a lot of friends who are like-minded and who
mhm.
are like, let's
Yes.
celebrate, let's like do a bachelorette but have yoga every day, right? You start to like incorporate it into your lives. Let's celebrate, let's go hike a mountain today and like cheers at the top. And yeah, I think it's like a different way for us to connect. Let's go together and have a spin class instead of like, let's go and like party. And definitely, I mean, still go and do those things. But as you get older and like nearing your 40s, like I am, those things just affect you so much more.
Yes. Yes.
Celebrating with like partying or drinking or staying even up late, whereas a spin class doesn't. It feels
Right.
great.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, let's shift gears and talk about perimenopause and how your movement routine has evolved um, as you go through that. Um, what's changed? What have you had to modify with this experience?
Yeah, I think I've actually done a lot of changes, and I have been in the awareness of perimenopause since I was probably 32 and prepping for this change because I deal with so many clients, either
Hmm.
nutritional or osteopathic, in this process, and I've seen what it can do and how
Hmm.
hard it can be for some people. The biggest things for me was, at 36, I got a bone density scan and found out that I was osteopenic. And that is something that will happen now. They don't say it's not if it will, they say when it will because of our loss of estrogen.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I needed immediately to start weight training. I
Mm-hmm.
was doing a lot of high intensity HIIT classes, obviously lots of body weight with yoga and Pilates, but to actually grow muscle and grow bone, you need to do strict weight training. You need to exercise to fail without your heart rate super elevated. And that really changed for me because it's not necessarily like I'm doing that in a class. I have now like a gym
Hmm.
set up at home. I've got to do,
Right.
4 to 5 days a week consistently. And then I also still love to, keep up my cardio and like go to classes with friends. And so that sort
Hmm.
of is like the bonus on top of my baseline.
Right.
So that's been a really big change and something that is necessary for women as we age. Absolutely. Weight training is like number one recommended when it comes to movement. And then also watching our cortisol because your cortisol levels have such a huge effect on the body. And as we get older, life is just more and more stressful. And we need to also honor where we're at and not just force ourselves to keep doing these high intensity outputs because stress is stress. And stress on the body is going to continue that dysregulation and increase those symptoms of perimenopause, which is such a massive array of symptoms at this point. And so, if we can manage that, we can usually lessen
Hmm.
that transition to an extent.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. How has your mindset shifted from, when you were a younger athlete to now as you're going through menopause? What are some thoughts or things that you tell your body in a loving way to kind of as you're experiencing this?
Oof, yeah, I think that is it's a constant effort. I think as humans, there's a lot of pressure on us to like look a certain way, and then you add something like the wellness industry to your title or your presence. And there's definitely a lot of pressure to see your body as like a calling card or a resume. And so I definitely I try to not let how my clothes fit and feel dictate sort of the narrative that's in my head. But I'll admit it's tricky, sometimes that is my motivation to be like, whoa, I feel, I'm feeling like a little bit soft, or I'm sort of like spilling over my pants. I want to like schedule a few classes this week. And that's my motivational factor. I think it's tricky again in this industry to not fall into that category of comparison, and be hard on ourselves. That's, I mean, what the beauty industry and fitness industry somewhat is like built on, is
Hmm.
us continuing to do that.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I think it's mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to those practices and feeling strong instead of looking at my body in the mirror and being like, oh, look at that roll coming out of your sports bra, or like that feels super tight today. That's weird. What does that mean? Yeah, it's really trying to have a balance, I guess, even though I feel like balance is such a word we use in the wellness industry and kind of an impossibility, but finding a counterpart to the negative narrative that is so deeply ingrained in us, just efforting as often as we can to speak to ourselves positively in the space of our bodies and movement.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all really good points. Speaking of balance, I
Mhm.
wanted to touch on rest. How do you listen to your body and notice when your body needs rest and actually go through with that or prioritize rest?
Sometimes I don't. Sometimes
Yeah,
you hear those
fair.
like little whispers, or you get that little kink in your shoulder, like your back, and you
Hmm.
just push through anyway. And then for me, my body's indicator of too much is I will go into spasm and lay you out for a couple of days. So I'm on muscle relaxants. I
Yeah.
literally can't walk. My husband is carrying me around the house, like holding me to go to the bathroom. And it doesn't happen often or as often as it used to. I equate that to a lot of like strength and stress management, but rest is something I think most people struggle with because of those drivers of I need to be consistent. I want to feel a certain way or look a certain way in my body. And I think we overdo it quite often. So, 2 days of rest, I really try to force myself to have at least 2 days of rest each week. And sometimes on those rest days, it looks like still going for a walk or still
Right.
doing like light, like yoga practice. I prioritize my sleep like an insane person. I don't have my phone in my bedroom. I use my watch as like an alarm clock. I get into bed about an hour and a half to 2 hours before I actually go to sleep. I downregulate with reading. I think really listening to the body is tricky, but if you have routines set in place, it's easier not to fight that in those moments where you're like, I'm just going to go to another spin class today, or I'm going to do a double workout. And we know that that's going to kill us. And I think in getting to the age of 38, turning 39 next year, I can't do that anymore. It's just not
Hmm.
worth it. And it
Yeah.
really impacts me, not only physically, because that I can handle, but it's the mental part that wrecks me. And I can't show up for my job as well. And I don't show up for myself in those moments either. Making those like non-negotiables.
Yeah, I really liked the part where you said you go to bed and whether you're reading or whatever, you go to bed 2 hours before your actual bedtime because that, yeah, like I guess down regulating your nervous system and all that is so important. I find like even for myself, I'll, get ready for bed, but then yeah, I'm on my phone or I'm still checking emails or I'm like, oh, I'll just respond to this person or I'll do this one report or whatever. Um, and that can totally wait. It doesn't have to be done that night, but you're still in this on mode where you're still working or you're still doing stuff and you need like brain power to do something. So, yeah, absolutely. Rest can be just getting to bed early and just reading a book.
Setting your boundaries, figuring out what
Yes.
your boundaries are, and taking
Hmm.
rest weeks,
Yes.
especially for
Yes.
those who actually have like a period, use that as a rest week. Don't work out that week, just go for walks, maybe do some light stretching or very light movement, but implementing that once a month or typically like once every 6 to 8 weeks is so beneficial for the body to heal and repair. We need that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, to close out this conversation, tell me one thing you wish more people understood about movement as we age.
Mm, one thing about movement as we age, make it a priority. It will give back to you as much as you give to it.
Hmm.
It is medicine. And it is necessary medicine that if you can be in habit of creating that time and space in your schedule to have exercise now, it's going to be so much easier as you age. In our 40s, it becomes much more challenging to build routine, to build exercise. You have to learn everything that you don't know. There's so many barriers and barricades that we put in front of ourselves. I have to go to a gym. I have to find a trainer. Do I like this trainer? Is this what I'm liking? Is this feeling good for my body? So if you start to explore that earlier on and build that habit, it's just going to be easier as you get older. You'll know where to go. You'll know where to start. And it's that starting it, no matter when. If you can just start now. Maybe that's my advice. Just start now. Start with anything, even if it's just a walk for 10 minutes in your schedule. My husband has always been a really hard cookie to crack. We've been together for almost 16 years, and he's really resisted constant routine. And it started with buying an Apple Watch and doing a 5-minute ab challenge for 30 days. And since that was almost 4 years ago. And he has been consistent with exercise since then in his 40s. Start now, small bites, find what works. And that will, again, continue to feed and support you for the rest of your life.
And finding something that you enjoy. It's not a one size fits all. One person might like yoga, another person might like dancing, and that's totally fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Anything, whatever
Yes.
it is,
Yeah.
dancing around in your living room.
Yeah.
Playing with your grandkids or your
Yes.
children, like all of it
Yeah.
counts.
Yes. Any final thoughts or wisdom you'd like to share with listeners? Maybe you have a question for the listeners that you'd like them to ponder as they maybe dance or go for a walk or do some yoga.
Okay, two things come to mind. First thing, can we swear on this podcast?
Sure.
I'm like, fuck the numbers. Don't listen to the numbers so much. The calories, the weight on the scale. Think more about how you feel. That's what is important. And remembering the feeling afterwards, because there's always going to be resistance to creating time and space for something like movement. Remember how you feel afterwards and let this drive you back. Focus on the feeling physically, mentally, energetically, because that's what matters. The numbers don't matter, and you're going to find every excuse in the book not to. So when you do it, remember how it feels and let that reminder be something that drives you. Focus on the feelings, not the numbers.
Awesome. That was a wonderful discussion. I hope you got out of it just as much as I did. Thank you so much, Mel, for sharing your story and being vulnerable with us today and inspiring us with your story. I feel like I took so much away from that. That's it, my friends. I hope some things resonated with you and that you start your own movement practice. Hydration is everything. Whether you're hitting the gym, going for a run, or just tackling a busy day, staying properly hydrated keeps you feeling and performing at your best. That's why I love Canada Rock Hydration. They are a Canadian electrolytes brand and use 100% Canadian sea salt. It's packed with essential electrolytes to help you recover, rehydrate, and keep moving without compromising on flavor. Plus, no artificial junk, just clean, effective hydration. When you sign up for their newsletter, you get 10% off your first order. So why wait? Stay fueled, stay refreshed, and grab yours today. Their link is below in the show notes.
Thanks for listening. Please rate and review the podcast, as we'd love to hear your feedback. If you love what you're hearing and want to take the next step further, please visit www.joyfulmovement.ca.